Sarah Mitchell stepped off the bus at Fort Benning, Georgia, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At 32, she was older than most of the fresh-faced recruits streaming toward the processing center. The morning sun beat down on the asphalt, and she could already hear the distant sound of drill sergeants barking orders. She knew what people saw when they looked at her. A woman past her prime trying to play soldier, someone running from something rather than running towards something. They weren't entirely wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. The past 3 years had been the hardest of Sarah's life. After her younger brother Danny died in a training accident at this very base, she'd quit her job as a high school teacher and spent months drowning in grief and unanswered questions. The official report called it an accident, but Danny's last phone call home had told a different story. He'd mentioned problems with his unit, an instructor who had it out for him, and equipment that wasn't properly maintained. Sarah had promised herself she would find the truth, and the only way to do that was from the inside. "Move it, recruit," a drill sergeant's voice cut through her thoughts. "This ain't a vacation resort." Sarah quickened her pace, joining the flow of nervous young men and women filing into the reception building. Inside, the chaos was controlled but overwhelming. Recruits were herded from station to station, getting haircuts, receiving uniforms, filling out endless paperwork. At the medical screening station, Sarah noticed the sidelong glances from the younger recruits. A blonde girl who couldn't have been more than 19 whispered to her friend, "Isn't she kind of old for this?" Sarah pretended not to hear. She'd expected this. The real trouble started during the first formation in the company area. Drill Sergeant Morrison, a barrel-chested man with a voice like grinding gravel, paced in front of the assembled recruits. His eyes stopped on Sarah. "Well, well," he said, approaching her. "What do we have here? You somebody's mother who got lost on the way to the PTA meeting." Laughter rippled through the formation. Sarah kept her eyes forward, her face expressionless. "I asked you a question, recruit." "No, drill sergeant," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Then what are you doing in my army? You think you can keep up with these young warriors?" Morrison's face was inches from hers now. "You think you belong here?" "Yes, drill sergeant." He circled her like a predator. "We'll see about that." Over the next few days, Sarah realized Morrison's attention wasn't going away. While other recruits were corrected and moved on, she was singled out repeatedly. Her push-ups were never good enough. Her bunk was never made tight enough. During runs, he would position himself near her, commenting loudly about old ladies holding back the whole platoon, even though she finished in the middle of the pack. Some recruits seemed to take Morrison's lead. A cocky kid named Bradley from Texas started calling her grandma under his breath. Others simply avoided her, not wanting to be associated with someone the drill sergeant had marked as a target. But there were a few who saw something different. Marcus, a quiet recruit from Ohio, helped her adjust her rucksack straps when Morrison wasn't looking. Elena, a tough girl from New York, shared her extra protein bars after a particularly grueling day. "Don't let them break you," Elena whispered one night in the barracks. "Whatever your reason for being here, it must be important." Sarah nodded, thinking of Danny. His smile, his letters home, his dreams of serving his country. The last photo she had of him, taken just weeks before his death, showed him in his uniform, proud and strong. She kept it hidden in the lining of her duffel bag, along with the newspaper clipping about his death that raised more questions than it answered. As she lay in her bunk that night, listening to the sounds of 24 exhausted recruits sleeping around her, Sarah touched the center of her back through her shirt. The tattoo there was hidden now, but it was the reason she'd come, the reason she'd endure any amount of mockery or abuse. Because some promises couldn't be broken, and some truths needed to be uncovered, no matter the cost. The third week of basic training was known as the hardest. The initial shock had worn off, but the finish line was still impossibly far away. This was when recruits broke down, when some quit, when the drill sergeants pressed hardest to separate the strong from the weak. For Sarah, it felt like Morrison had declared personal war. During a land navigation exercise in the Georgia pine forests, he assigned her the most difficult route. While other recruits worked in pairs, she was sent alone. When she returned within the time limit, having found all her points, Morrison checked her card and grunted, "Barely acceptable." Bradley and his friends had grown bolder in their mockery. "Grandma's gonna break a hip out here," he said loud enough for everyone to hear during rifle training. "Somebody call life alert." Sarah ignored it, focusing on her shooting. She'd never handled a weapon before basic training, but she practiced every chance she got. On qualification day, she shot expert, one of only 5 recruits in the company to do so. Morrison barely acknowledged it. But that night something changed. During barracks inspection, Morrison stopped at Sarah's bunk, Mitchell front and center. Sarah approached, standing at attention. "Your footlocker is unsecured, recruit. Drop and give me 50. Sarah glanced at her footlocker. The lock was clearly engaged, but she knew better than to argue. She dropped to the push-up position. As she began counting, Morrison placed his boot on her back, adding weight. 48 more, recruit, and count louder. I want the whole platoon to hear what happens when standards aren't met." Sarah's arms shook. She could feel the eyes of every recruit in the barracks on her. The humiliation was designed to make her quit, to make her cry, to make her give up. Instead, she thought of Danny. She thought of the phone call when he'd told her about an instructor who seemed to have it out for him. She thought of how his voice had trembled, not with fear, but with frustration at the injustice of it. She finished all 50 push-ups. Morrison removed his boot. "Pathetic," he said, and walked away. That night, Alina found Sarah outside the barracks, sitting on the steps in the darkness. "He's trying to break you," Alina said quietly. "Why? What did you do to get on his radar like this?" "I exist," Sarah said simply. But she knew it was more than that. Morrison's intensity had increased over the past week, ever since she'd mentioned during a personal history interview that her brother had died at Fort Benning. She'd seen something flicker in Morrison's eyes then. A recognition that had turned into something harder. "My brother trained here 3 years ago," Sarah said suddenly. "He died during a training accident, or that's what they called it." Alina sat down beside her. "And you think it wasn't an accident?" "I think someone was making his life hell, just like Morrison is doing to me. I think my brother was strong and capable, and someone pushed him too far." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I think if I'd been here, if I'd known how bad it was, I could have helped him." "So you came to find out what really happened?" "I came to finish what he started, and to make sure no one else gets treated the way he did." Alina was quiet for a moment. "Morrison's scared of you, that's what I think. He sees something in you that threatens him." The next morning, during the obstacle course, Sarah's suspicions deepened. As she climbed the rope wall, she heard Morrison talking to another drill sergeant below. The words were faint, but she caught fragments. "Just like her brother. Too many questions. Needs to learn her place." Her hands nearly slipped. Morrison had known Danny. Had he been one of the instructors who made Danny's life miserable? Sarah made it over the wall and continued through the course, her mind racing. When she finished, Morrison was waiting. "Mitchell, my office, now." She followed him to the small building that housed the drill sergeant's offices. Her heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. Inside, Morrison closed the door. The room was sparse, official photos on the walls, a desk covered in paperwork. He didn't sit down, neither did she. "I'm going to give you a chance, Mitchell," Morrison said, his voice low and different than his usual bark. "You don't belong here. You're too old, you can't keep up, and you're a distraction to the other recruits. I can make this easy for you. Put in for a voluntary discharge. Failure to adapt. No shame in it." "I'm not quitting, drill sergeant." His jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "With respect, drill sergeant, That's not your decision to make. Something dangerous flickered in Morrison's eyes. Everything that happens in this company is my decision. Everything. You do well to remember that. As Sarah left his office, her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from recognition. This was exactly what Danny must have faced. The pressure, the isolation, the message that he didn't belong. But Sarah had one advantage Danny hadn't had. She knew what she was walking into, and she wasn't going to break. Week 5 brought the confidence course and team-building exercises. It also brought Captain James Reeves, the company commander who had been away at a conference. His return changed the atmosphere in subtle ways. Morrison was still in charge of day-to-day training, but Reeves would be present for key evaluations. Sarah first saw him during morning formation. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with steady eyes that seemed to actually see the recruits as individuals rather than interchangeable bodies. When his gaze passed over her, there was no judgment, just assessment. "Listen up," Morrison announced. "Captain Reeves will be observing training this week. You will perform to standard. You will make this company look good. Anyone who embarrasses me will wish they'd never been born. Are we clear?" "Yes, Drill Sergeant," the platoon shouted. During hand-to-hand combat training that afternoon, Sarah found herself paired with Bradley. He grinned at her. "Try not to break a hip, Grandma." The drill sergeant overseeing the exercise demonstrated the techniques, then set the pairs to practicing. Bradley barely tried at first, clearly not taking Sarah seriously. But when she executed a perfect hip throw that sent him flat on his back, his expression changed. "Lucky shot," he muttered, getting up. They went again. This time Sarah swept his legs and controlled his fall. And again. By the 5th repetition, Bradley wasn't laughing anymore, and several other recruits had stopped to watch. "Where'd you learn that?" Elena asked later. "Started taking classes after Danny died," Sarah admitted. "I needed something to do with my anger." What she didn't mention was that she'd also spent hours researching Fort Benning's training protocols, studying military regulations, and talking to veterans about what red flags to look for in abusive training environments. She'd prepared for this mission as carefully as any military operation. That preparation paid off 2 days later. During a equipment maintenance class, Sarah noticed something odd. The climbing harnesses they were inspecting looked worn, with fraying at the stress points. When she examined hers more closely, she saw the inspection tag was 3 months overdue. She raised her hand. "Drill Sergeant, this equipment hasn't been inspected according to the schedule." Morrison's face darkened. "That's above your pay grade, recruit." "But the regulation says." "I said that's above your pay grade. Drop and give me 25. Sarah complied, but her mind was working. Danny had mentioned equipment problems, climbing harnesses. His accident had occurred during rappelling training. After the class, Sarah approached Marcus quietly. "You're good with details, right? You worked in an office before this." "Accounting," he confirmed. "How would someone get access to old training records? Accidents, incident reports, that kind of thing." Marcus looked nervous. "That's not something recruits should be messing with." "I know, but my brother died here 3 years ago, and I think something was covered up." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "There's a Freedom of Information Act request process, but it takes months. Why not just ask the commander directly?" It was a simple suggestion, but it made sense. Captain Reeves seemed different from Morrison. Maybe he was someone who would listen. The next day, Sarah requested to speak with Captain Reeves. Morrison's expression when she made the request could have curdled milk, but he couldn't refuse. It was every soldier's right to speak with their commander. That evening, Sarah stood at attention in Captain Reeves's office. Unlike Morrison's space, this room felt more personal. There were photos of Reeves with soldiers in various locations, books on leadership on the shelves, and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Commander." "At ease, Private Mitchell," Reeves said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit down, tell me what's on your mind." Sarah sat, choosing her words carefully. "Sir, I wanted to speak with you about my brother, Danny Mitchell. He was a recruit here 3 years ago. He died during rappelling training." Reeves's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "I remember that case. I wasn't the commander then, but I reviewed the incident report when I took over. It was ruled an accidental death, harness failure. I'm very sorry for your loss." "Thank you, sir. But I have questions about what happened before the accident. My brother called home the week before he died. He said he was having problems with his training unit, that someone was singling him out." "Did he name anyone specifically?" Sarah hesitated. "No, sir. But today during equipment inspection, I noticed our climbing harnesses were overdue for inspection. My brother died from a harness failure." Reeves leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "That's a serious observation. Equipment safety is critical. Are you saying you think there was negligence involved in your brother's death?" "I'm saying I think someone made his life difficult enough that he might not have felt comfortable reporting safety concerns. And I think the same thing is happening now." "To you?" "Yes, sir." Reeves was quiet for a moment. "Private Mitchell, I want to be straight with you. If you're making allegations against a drill sergeant, that's a very serious matter. I would need evidence, not just feelings or suspicions." "I understand, sir. That said, I take all safety concerns seriously. I'll have the equipment inspected immediately, and I'll be watching training more closely." He paused. "Is there anything else?" Sarah made a decision. "Sir, I'd like permission to see the full incident report from my brother's death." "That's not standard procedure for family members." "I'm not just family, sir. I'm a soldier in his unit. I have the right to know if there are systemic problems that could affect my safety or the safety of my fellow recruits." Reeves studied her with newfound respect. "You're not what you appear to be, are you, Private Mitchell?" "I'm exactly what I appear to be, sir. Someone who cares about doing things right." "I'll consider your request dismissed." As Sarah left, she didn't see Morrison in the shadows outside, but he'd been there, listening to every word. The equipment inspection that Captain Reeves ordered caused immediate tension. A team from base safety arrived the next morning, and the training schedule was disrupted while every piece of climbing and rappelling equipment was examined. Morrison was furious, though he couldn't show it openly. During physical training that morning, he pushed the entire company harder than ever. "Because of one recruit's complaints," he announced, "we've lost valuable training time. You can thank Mitchell for the extra miles you're running today." Sarah felt the resentment from some recruits, but Elena and Marcus stayed close. So did a few others who'd grown tired of Morrison's arbitrary cruelty. The inspection results came back that afternoon. 7 harnesses were immediately taken out of service. 3 had stress damage that made them unsafe. 1 was the same model and manufacturer as the harness that had failed during Danny's accident. Captain Reeves called a company formation. "I want to be clear," he said, his voice carrying authority. "Safety is not negotiable. Equipment inspection schedules exist for a reason. When those schedules aren't followed, people die." He looked directly at Morrison. "Drill Sergeant Morrison, you and I will discuss the equipment logs after this formation." Sarah felt a small victory, but she knew it wasn't enough. Equipment neglect might explain how Danny died, but it didn't explain why he'd been targeted in the first place. That night, Marcus approached her with a folded piece of paper. "I did something I probably shouldn't have," he whispered. "I have a friend who works in the admin building. She helped me pull some old training records during her lunch break." Sarah unfolded the paper. It was a list of recruits from Danny's training cycle, along with their drill sergeants. There was Danny's name, and next to it, DSGT Morrison J. Her hands started shaking. Morrison had been Danny's drill sergeant. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. 3 recruits from that cycle filed complaints about training methods. One of them was your brother. All 3 complaints were dismissed as failure to adapt to military standards, and all 3 of those recruits had accidents before graduation. Your brother's was the only fatal one. Sarah felt cold. Where are the other 2 now? One medically retired. One quit before the end of training, but my friend said there's been complaints about Morrison in other cycles too. Nothing ever sticks because he's careful. He never leaves marks, never makes direct threats. He just pushes people until they break. Or until they die, Sarah said softly. She knew what she had to do, but it was risky. She needed proof, not just suspicions and coincidences. She needed Morrison to reveal himself. The next day during rappelling training, with the new, properly inspected equipment, Sarah volunteered to go first. Morrison's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't refuse without cause. As she was hooking into the harness, Sarah spoke loud enough for Morrison to hear. "This reminds me of my brother. He loved this part of training." Morrison's hands paused in checking her connections. "Your brother?" "Danny Mitchell. He trained here 3 years ago with you." The silence was thick. Other recruits sensed something happening. Even the other drill sergeant stopped talking. "I train a lot of recruits," Morrison said flatly. "But you remember him, I can tell." Sarah looked directly at Morrison. "He filed a complaint about you, about unsafe training methods and equipment." Morrison's face hardened. "Your brother was weak. He couldn't handle real Army training. That's what killed him, not me, not the equipment, his own weakness." "Drill Sergeant Morrison," Captain Reeves's voice cut through the air. No one had noticed him approaching. "My office, now." Morrison's expression went blank. "Yes, sir." As Morrison walked away, Reeves looked at Sarah. "You okay to continue, Private Mitchell?" "Yes, sir." "Then carry on, and Private, we'll talk after training." Sarah completed the rappel perfectly, her mind clear despite her racing heart. When she reached the bottom, Alina was there. "That was either really brave or really stupid," she said. "Maybe both." 2 hours later, Sarah was back in Captain Reeves's office. This time, another officer was present, a woman with the insignia of the Inspector General's office. "Private Mitchell," Reeves began, "this is Major Hendricks. She investigates allegations of training misconduct. I called her immediately after the equipment inspection raised red flags. Your timing this afternoon was fortunate." Drill Sergeant Morrison's comments were heard by multiple witnesses. Major Hendricks leaned forward. "Private Mitchell, I need you to tell me everything. Start from why you enlisted." Sarah told them. About Danny's death, his phone calls home, her promise to find the truth. About Morrison's escalating harassment, the equipment problems, Marcus's discovery of the pattern of complaints and accidents. "I know I've probably violated regulations by investigating this myself," Sarah admitted, "but no one else was doing it. No one else cared that my brother died under suspicious circumstances." "Someone cared," Reeves said quietly. "When I took command here, I requested a review of all training accidents in the previous 5 years. Your brother's death was one of several that concerned me, but I needed evidence, and the previous investigation had been closed. What you've uncovered gives me grounds to reopen it." Major Hendricks added, "There's something else you should know. You're not the only family member who's complained about Drill Sergeant Morrison. There have been 3 formal inquiries in the past 4 years, but without evidence of direct wrongdoing and with Morrison's careful methods, nothing stuck." "Until now," Reeves said. His statement today, witnessed by multiple soldiers, combined with the equipment safety violations and the pattern you've identified, is enough for a formal investigation. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes but didn't let them fall. "What happens to him?" "He's been relieved of training duties pending the investigation. If we find evidence of criminal negligence in your brother's death or deliberate abuse of recruits, he'll face court-martial." Will I be able to finish training? Reeves smiled slightly. Private Mitchell, despite everything you've been through, your performance scores are in the top 10% of this company. You'll not only finish training, you'll graduate with honors if you keep this up. 8 weeks later, Sarah stood in formation on the parade ground at Fort Benning, wearing her Army dress uniform for the first time. The Georgia sun was bright, and families filled the bleachers, waiting for the basic training graduation ceremony to begin. The investigation into Morrison had moved quickly once it started. Major Hendricks had interviewed dozens of current and former recruits. The pattern was undeniable. Morrison had systematically targeted soldiers he perceived as weak, using methods designed to avoid detection. Equipment safety violations, verbal abuse disguised as tough training, deliberate isolation of victims. The evidence in Danny's case was enough to bring manslaughter charges. A witness came forward, another drill sergeant who'd been present that day and had always felt guilty about staying silent. He testified that Morrison had cleared Danny to rappel despite Danny reporting that his harness felt loose. Morrison had called him weak, told him he was making excuses. The harness failed halfway down. Morrison was awaiting court-martial, facing years in military prison. But today wasn't about Morrison. Today was about the graduates, about those who'd made it through despite everything. "Company attention," Drill Sergeant Williams called. She'd taken over from Morrison, and under her leadership, the final weeks of training had been tough but fair. Captain Reeves stepped forward to address the gathering. "Family and friends, honored guests, it's my privilege to present the graduating class of Charlie Company. These soldiers have demonstrated courage, resilience, and character. They represent the best of what our Army can be." Sarah's eyes scanned the crowd. She hadn't expected anyone to come. Her parents had died years ago, and she had no other close family. But then she spotted them, Alina's family and Marcus's, and a group of Danny's old friends from his hometown who'd driven 5 hours when they heard she was graduating. "Today we have a special recognition," Reeves continued. "Private Sarah Mitchell front and center." Sarah's heart skipped. This wasn't part of the rehearsal. She marched forward, stopping in front of Reeves and saluting. "At ease, Private Mitchell," Reeves's voice carried across the parade ground. 3 years ago, this base suffered a tragedy. Private Daniel Mitchell died during training. His death was ruled accidental, but his sister Sarah knew there were unanswered questions. Rather than accept the official story, she made an extraordinary choice. She enlisted, went through the same training program, and uncovered a pattern of abuse that had been hidden for years. He paused, letting his words sink in. In doing so, Private Mitchell not only found justice for her brother, but potentially saved the lives of countless future soldiers. She demonstrated courage, integrity, and the kind of moral character we need in our Army. Reeves picked up a small box from the table beside him. "Private Mitchell, it is my honor to present you with the Army Achievement Medal for your actions, and to inform you that you're being assigned to Fort Benning's Training Oversight Department. You'll be working with Major Hendricks to improve safety protocols and complaint procedures across all basic training companies." Sarah was speechless. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd thought she'd graduate and move on, her mission complete. "Do you accept this assignment, Private Mitchell?" "Yes, sir," she managed. As Reeves pinned the medal to her uniform, he spoke quietly just for her. "Your brother would be proud, and he didn't die in vain." After the ceremony, as Sarah was accepting congratulations from her fellow graduates, an older couple approached her. The woman had tears in her eyes. "Private Mitchell, I'm Bate Rogers. My son Tyler was in your brother's training class. He was one of the ones who was injured and medically discharged. We've been trying for 3 years to get someone to listen about what happened. Thank you. Thank you for being strong enough to do what we couldn't." Sarah hugged her, feeling the weight of 3 years of grief and determination finally lifting. "It's what Danny would have done for me." As the crowd dispersed, Elena came over, her family in tow. "So, Hero, what's next?" "I guess I'm staying here," Sarah said, "making sure no one else goes through what Danny did." Marcus joined them. "We're putting in requests to stay at Bennying too. Somebody's got to watch your back." Sarah smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: hope, not just for herself but for every soldier who would come through this base in the future. Later that evening, alone in her new room in the barracks for permanent personnel, Sarah carefully removed her dress uniform. She stood in front of the mirror and looked over her shoulder at her back. The tattoo covered most of her upper back, a detailed portrait of Danny in his army uniform, surrounded by the words "promise kept" and his dates of birth and death. She'd gotten it the week before enlisting, a reminder of why she was doing this whenever she felt like giving up. She'd kept it hidden through all of basic training, following regulations about covering tattoos. Morrison had never seen it. If he had, he might have realized earlier who she was and what she was after. But Captain Reeves had seen it. On her second day in his office, when she'd handed him a folder of evidence and her uniform shirt had shifted, revealing the edge of the tattoo, that's when he'd truly understood her dedication. "We did it, Danny," Sarah whispered to the image on her back. "We did it together." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Private Mitchell, this is Major Hendricks. Welcome to the team. Report Monday 800. We have work to do." Sarah smiled and replied, "Roger that, ma'am, ready to serve." She looked at her reflection one more time, not the broken, grieving sister who'd arrived at Fort Benning 12 weeks ago, but a soldier with purpose. Someone who'd turned her pain into power, her loss into justice. The Army had a saying, "This will defend." For Sarah Mitchell, those words had taken on new meaning. She would defend not just her country, but every soldier who walked through these gates. She would make sure that what happened to Danny never happened again. And as she looked at the tattoo one more time before turning out the light, she knew that some promises were worth any sacrifice. Some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost. Because that's what family did. That's what soldiers did. They kept their promises. They defended the defenseless. They stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Sarah Mitchell had come to Fort Benning looking for the truth about her brother's death. She'd found it. But more than that, she'd found her purpose. She'd found where she belonged.